welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and again, we got spoilers from the new set, March of the Machine, that is coming out not until late April, but we're already getting some spoilers dropped on us. And again, I like to talk about these legendary creatures and how significant they will be in the format and how interesting they are. There's a lot to talk about with this set. And of course, the big one being they sort of have these team up commanders, right? So they're taking legendary characters that we already have in the game and they're combining them. And of course, they're combining a lot of the abilities. So for example, let's take a look at Slimefoot and Squee. Again, what's the lore here? Why are these guys teaming up? Who knows? I'm sure they have an explanation. So again, Slimefoot is the, Saproling tribal commander. So I imagine we're going to be doing some of that. Squee he's immortal. You can't kill him. You keep getting him back. That's what I think of when I think of Squee. Mono red, obviously. Slimefoot being black and green. So we have a Jund commander here. Black, red, and green. Fungus Goblin, a very interesting creature type there. Obviously the combination of the two. And it's a 3/3. Whenever Slimefoot and Squee enters the battlefield or attacks, create a 1/1 green sapling creature token. So there we have that Saproling creation that we would expect. Pay 1 black, red, and a green. Sacrifice a Saproling. Return Slimefoot and Squee and up to one other target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. Wow. I was expecting that to be just return them. So you're doing obviously the Slimefoot thing with the Saprolings, but the last ability I was like, okay, well, they're going to make it easy for you to return your commander to the battlefield, but return another creature as well from your graveyard to the battlefield. I think that's going a bit far. That is really powerful, right? Obviously, sacrificing a Saproling is the easiest thing in the world. Your commander is making them, but even if it wasn't, there's how many cards in the history of the game that are spitting out Saproling tokens very easily. I guess the drawback here, or what's holding you back a little bit, is your commander has to be in the graveyard, right? So that would be, I guess, the one drawback. You're returning Slimefoot and Squee and up to one other target creature. So your commander has to be in the graveyard in order for you to do this, but that's not difficult, right? You're going to want sack outlets in this deck anyway. So at any time, like I cast my commander for 3 mana, right? It enters the battlefield, gives me a Saproling token. On the next turn, I can attack and create another one if I want to, or I can just sacrifice my commander with a high market or something. Very easy to do. I mean, I guess an altar effect, like a Phyrexian altar or something would be even better because now you're getting the mana as well. Then I've got something in my graveyard already. I sacrifice that Saproling, pay the 4 mana. I get my commander back, get another token because it's entering the battlefield, and then get another creature on top of that. Boy, that seems really, really good. I mean, this is a loop, right? We're in a loop here where you can constantly be sacrificing Saprolings, sacrificing your commander. Commander comes back in, you get another Saproling token, sacrifice that one, get it back again. Very easy to create a loop, and this is really powerful, I think. I mean, isn't it? It's almost like Recurring Nightmare in a way, because, I mean, you would need Graveyard Hate against this deck for sure. I say it all the time. You have to have Graveyard Hate in your deck, and this is a deck where, man, if you don't have Graveyard Hate, they're just going to walk all over you, I would imagine. I mean, are there some loops here that we can create? Right? If you have a creature that is entering the battlefield and then giving you mana, or a creature that enters the battlefield and then you can sacrifice it to add mana, that might work. It's giving you some of the mana you need to activate the ability, right? Another interesting thing you can do here is like a conspiracy where you turn all your creatures into Saprolings. So now all your creatures are Saprolings and you can sacrifice any creature to get your commander back. I mean, I'm sure there are going to be some loops or infinite combos that can be created here. This is a really powerful ability. I mean, it's obviously not hard to get super big busted creatures into your graveyard that you can then recur. I mean, you have recursion staple on your commander. That alone is really, really good. My commander is sort of a Recurring Nightmare a little bit, right? That's incredibly powerful. Jund Colors is great for this. Lots of support there. Whew, this is going to be a popular one for sure. All right, moving on to Goro, and Satoru. So Satoru being Satoru Umezawa, the ninja commander, already a really popular commander. And then Goro being a lot less of a popular commander, the mono red one that is doing the modified theme, creating dragons. So how much are we combining of that? We have blue, black, and a red here, obviously, because we're combining those colors. So a Grixis commander, goblin, human, of course, and a 3/4. Whenever one or more creatures you control that entered the battlefield this turn deal combat damage to a player, create a 5/5 red dragon spirit creature token with flying. And you can pay 1 and a red. Creatures you control gain haste until end of turn, of course. Oh boy. Okay, so man, these commanders are cheap, eh? That's one thing I've been noticing. Like they're like 2-3 colors, and they're just those. That's your casting cost and nothing. These are cheap commanders. I mean, I like that. If I'm building a deck, I like having a cheap commander that I can get out early and start going to town. So whenever one or more creatures you control that entered the battlefield this turn deal combat damage. So obviously you want to do haste tribal here a lot, right? You want haste enablers, or you just want hasty creatures. Phoenix Chick is a card that I have now committed to memory. Although it doesn't seem like it, that's a very important card in a lot of decks. It is a 1 mana flying haste creature that, for a lot of reasons, you want a creature like that in your deck. It also has recursion, of course, because it's a phoenix, which is great. But just the fact that it's a 1 mana creature with flying and haste is really, really important, because if you're in any deck where you want attack triggers or deal damage triggers, it's a great fit. And it's the only creature in the entire game that does that. It's the only creature that is 1 mana flying and haste. So here's another commander where it's a great include. I cast my commander, then I just, for 1 mana, I put that Phoenix Chick into play. I swing with it. It's got flying, so it's got evasion. It's going to be very easy for me to get in for damage. Obviously it can attack right away. You have dealt the damage to a player the turn that it entered the battlefield, and you get to create a 5/5 dragon spirit creature token flying. That seems pretty good. Obviously, the stipulation here is that creature must have entered the battlefield this turn. Blink effects will also work here, right? So you could do a blink theme as well, where I can blink my creature. Obviously, again, the haste enablers is key here, whether it be using your commander's ability, or there's lots of other options, obviously, that you can use. Just the lightning greaves will work. I blink my creature, right? So you can reuse creatures here. I blink a creature, and a lot of the blue blink effects are returned to the battlefield immediately. So it exiles and then comes back right away, right? Some of them are at the beginning of the next end step. A lot of the blue ones blink immediately. They come back. You equip them with a lightning greaves or give it haste in some other way and then swing with it. Evasion creatures are going to be huge here. This is whenever 1 or more creatures you control that entered the battlefield this turn deal combat damage to a player. The wording there is really important here for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's 1 or more, but it's to a player. So if you attack different players, you can get more than 1 dragon token on a turn. Token doublers, I don't really think we have any. Populate, a little bit you could do here. A little bit. There's not a ton of great populate effects. That new one from, I believe, New Capenna. Again, I have to commit the name to memory because it is a really important card in a lot of decks. That'll be a great fit here where you're populating on your, I think, at the beginning of combat every turn. Pretty good. I think this is going to be a popular one. Again, evasion creatures, blinking, haste enablers. That's all the stuff you want to be doing here. Pretty neat. This one I like. I don't love a lot of the combinations of these creatures are just, they just take what the one commander's or the one legendary creature's doing and the other one, and they just slap it on one card together. Here they did it in a very interesting way. I kind of like it. All right, moving on. Katilda and Lear, and again, this is the combination here, and Katilda is that's the white-green commander. Is that the one that's doing human tribal, or it's doing the mana dork thing? I think it's doing human tribal, right? Lear is the one that it's the mono blue, and nobody can counter stuff, and all your stuff has flashback, right? So interesting combination here. Obviously, it's a Bant commander, green, white, and a blue. Human. We only have one creature type here because they're both humans. 3/3. Whenever you cast a human spell, so we're in human tribal. Yeah, target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. So again, they've just really, by the way, the art here is fantastic. I love the art on this one. They've just combined the two abilities. They've just combined the whole human tribal aspect with the flashback thing. So, it's an interesting combination because there really isn't a lot of overlap here with how many human spells have flashback? Or how many human spells are also instant? Okay, here's an interesting thing you can do here is changeling spells, like a crib swap, right? A crib swap has all creature types because it has changeling. So it is when you cast it, it is considered a human spell. And obviously it's also an instant, I believe, right? So that will work. So a card like that, any changeling, instant, or sorceries will be great here because they will trigger your commander's ability and then they'll go to the graveyard and then you can flash them back, trigger your commander's ability again when you cast them with flashback, right? Again, we have to look at how the stack interacts here, right? I've talked about this quite a bit in my rules videos. You're actually casting, and when it says human spell, that means it's on the stack. A spell exists on the stack. So anything that is a human spell is going to be something that is on the stack that also has the human creature type. So either it's most likely going to be a creature that has the type human, or it can be one of those changeling spells. I think a lot of those changeling spells will fit nicely in this deck for that reason, because you can trigger your commander with them and then cast them again from your graveyard later because they're going to be likely an instant or a sorcery. So that would be a neat way to go with this. Other than that, it's these don't work great together because, of course, your human spells are going to be almost entirely creatures, and you can't cast your creatures from your graveyard, only instant your sorceries. There's a lot of neat things you can do here, though. Again, the changeling thing works great. This would be an interesting deep dive. This would be a really interesting deep dive to go into how can I make these two abilities work together, the human tribal part and the instant and sorcery part, because they don't really on their face work well together. But how much could you make them work well together, right? Any instant or sorcery that is also human tribal would work good. Like how much are you going to do the human tribal thing? If I put a whole bunch of humans in this deck, I'm not going to have a lot of instants and sorceries in my graveyard to flash back. So I'm not going to be taking a lot of advantage of this. You could also do I'm casting stuff from my graveyard a lot. If there's a lot of support, if I'm not sure how much support there is there, maybe a little bit of I cast stuff from my graveyard. That's going to help cards leaving your graveyard, stuff like that. Again, I don't know if there's a whole lot of support in Bant colors for that, but you could do that as well. This is an interesting one. This is really interesting. I might have to maybe take a look at this and see if I can do some interesting things, because these abilities don't really appear to work great together, but there might be some interesting things you can do here. All right, moving on. Heliod, the Radiant Dawn. So we have another Heliod iteration, and it is, again, a legendary enchantment creature god. So we're still doing that. This one's 2 white, and it's a 4/4. When Heliod, the Radiant Dawn, enters the battlefield, return target enchantment card that isn't a god from your graveyard to your hand. It is sort of enchantment tribal, I guess, right? The interesting thing is we don't have any indestructible stuff here, right? You don't have the devotion. Usually they have some sort of ability that protects makes it harder for your commander to kill or make it come back really easily. This is a legendary enchantment creature, which means it dies to enchant removal and creature removal. That's not great. However, we have another ability here, and it is a blue ability, which means this is an Azorius commander, right? 3 and a Phyrexian blue mana. So again, we're doing the Phyrexian thing on a god. That's kind of weird. So I'm going to pay 4 mana, and I'm going to transform Heliod, the Radiant Dawn, activate only as a sorcery. So we have another transforming commander, and the backside is Heliod, the Warped Eclipse. And I guess I should point out here, the front side has no stipulations at all. It's just 4 mana to transform. I guess you can even pay just 3 mana to transform, right? So there's no stipulations here. You can very easily play your commander and then, the next turn immediately transform it. So the backside, again, is a legendary enchantment creature. And there's no protection here. There's no indestructible. Maybe, there's some lore here for why, your commander just seems really easy to kill. I don't know if I love that. It's now a Phyrexian god. Okay. 4/6, you may cast spells as though they had flash. That's pretty good, right? That's always good. Spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each card your opponents have drawn this turn. Well, I was looking at this and I was like, okay, the enchantment thing is sort of very meh. It's not great. I don't know if I would go near an enchantment tribal deck if that's all the payoff I was getting. Casting your spells as though they had flash is very interesting, but boy, does that ever play into that last ability, right? Like the really interesting thing here is you want your opponents to be drawing cards, right? Now, of course, your opponents are going to be doing that anyway. You can cast your spells on your opponent's turn, so you can just wait for them to draw their card on their draw step, and then I flash, whatever in. It costs one less because my opponents have drawn one card. What you really want, of course, is your opponents to draw a lot of cards. This is a really interesting commander now that I think of it. Again, I don't love the part where it doesn't have any sort of indestructible protection. I don't know if there's a specific reason for that. Your commander is really easy to kill. I don't love that. But man, this is an interesting build around. I mean, you're probably going to want to play a hug theme here, right? You want your opponents to draw a ton of cards so that you can then cast that really, like that expropriate for like 2 blue mana or something, right? Hold on. Spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each card your opponents have drawn this turn. Opponents. That's cumulative, right? So if I cast a windfall effect, my opponents have now drawn a ton of cards. Let's say they've drawn like 20 cards. My spells are going to cost 20 less to cast for each card. Yeah, right? Well, that's really good. So now my expropriate's going to cost 2 blue mana. That's pretty good. And I can do it at instant speed. Oh boy, yeah. Windfall seems like a really good card in this deck. You want your opponents to be drawing cards. You could just forego that entirely and just, wait till your opponents draw a bunch of cards, wait till they cast a wheel effect or something, or, and then you can just go nuts because you can cast your spells as though they had flash. But I think you want to build around it because, man, you could really go nuts here. And I guess it's probably a good thing that your commander doesn't have any protection because this is a powerful ability. If I'm reading it correctly, spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each card your opponents have drawn this turn. So that's counting all of your opponents. So any wheel or windfall is the one you're going to be able to play in your deck. Jeez, hey, you could really go nuts here. X spells are going to be great here, obviously, because you can just load up on the X's. And you could really go off because you can cast those huggy X spells. I can't remember what that one is called, as Prosperity, right? So you make all your opponents draw a bunch of cards, then you cast Prosperity and make them draw a whole bunch of more cards. You could very easily draw your opponents to death with a deck like this, right? That would be an interesting strategy to go here. This is an interesting commander. Is it too powerful? I mean, you do have to transform it. The front side with the enchantment thing is interesting. I wonder why they put that on there. That doesn't seem to fit with the backside at all. If you have an enchantment that is letting your opponents draw extra cards, like a dictate, what's the blue dictate that is doing that? Other than that, the front side is weird, and I mean, why would you ever want to build around that? You wouldn't. You would just play this commander and then immediately transform it. Yeah, because the backside is absolutely the way you want to be building this deck. Pretty interesting. I'd love to hear the comments on this one. Is this too powerful? I don't know. You definitely can do some busted things here for sure. It's an interesting one. All right, moving on to the last one. And we got another Jin Cataxius. Did anybody else know that they were going to revisit these again? Man, this is now the third Jin Cataxius, and the first two were really powerful. How powerful is this one going to be? It only costs 5 mana, 3 blue. Phyrexian Praetor, of course, 5/5. Has Ward 2, great. Again, I like protection on my commander. Makes it a little harder to remove. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater, draw a card. That's pretty good. Yep, that is really, really good. You don't have to build around that at all. That's just, I just happen to cast a spell. Like mana value 3 or greater is the majority of your deck. I would imagine most decks, like for me, even if you're just talking about mana value 3, if you watch my deck doctor videos on my Patreon, I talk about this all the time. Whenever I put a deck together, if you look at the mana curve, mana value 3 is always the biggest. Always. Every deck I make in Commander, and I think this should be mostly the case, mana value 3, I'm going to have more mana value 3 cards than any other. So if you just look at mana value 3, this includes mana value 3. So this means, I would imagine for most decks, the majority of spells you're going to cast, and non-creature spell, let's keep that in mind, but of course, you're going to build around that. Most of these spells you probably are going to cast in your deck. In fact, you could very easily probably build this deck so that you don't have any creatures at all, so that most of the spells that you are casting are going to draw you a card. That's incredible. And this is not once per turn or triggers only once each turn. No, this is just every time you cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater, you get to draw a card. That's great. What else is it doing, though? That's not all. 3 and a blue. Exile Jin Cataxius, then return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. Again, we are transforming. Activate only as a sorcery, and so now we actually have a stipulation here, unlike the other one. Only if you have 7 or more cards in hand. Okay, so there is a stipulation here. However, not that difficult, especially considering with that first ability, you're going to be drawing cards very easily. So when you flip it over, it is going to be a saga. Wow, really? The Great Synthesis. Here's something we've never seen before. Draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand. So I would like to point out, the transform ability is you're exiling it, right? Sometimes transforming is you're just flipping it over. And sometimes it is exile and it comes back into play. So that means you're going to trigger, right? That's how chapters work. You're going to trigger that first chapter. So when you activate that transform ability, it actually gets exiled and comes back into play on the enchantment side, and it's going to trigger that first chapter immediately. So you're going to draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand. Oh boy, and you have at least 7 cards in hand. You have no maximum hand size for as long as you control the Great Synthesis. Wow. So this is 4 mana, draw 7 cards, minimum, right? Because you have to have 7 cards in your hand. Oh boy, that's really good. That is really, really good. So I guess obviously the thing you're going to want to do here without looking at anything else is draw triggers, right? Whenever you draw a card, do this. There's lots of cards, or Neurophage and stuff like that are going to work great here. You're going to get 7 draw triggers immediately as soon as you hit chapter 1. Anything that does the draw second card each turn could also work here as well, but not nearly as beneficial as the stuff that's going to get you a benefit off of every single card draw trigger, right? Teferi's Insight is going to draw you an absurd amount of cards, right? Because every time you draw a card, instead you're going to draw 2. So that alone is really, really good. But what else is it doing? Chapter 2, return all non-Phyrexian creatures to their owner's hands. Oh boy, that is really good. So again, as I already mentioned, maybe you want to build this deck with no creatures at all. This is definitely leaning towards that strategy. I guess you could put Phyrexian creatures in here if you want to, because they're not going to get bounced to hand. But man, that is a great ability. That's always good, of course. 3rd chapter, you may cast any number of spells from your hand without paying their mana costs. Exile the Great Synthesis, then return it to the... What is happening here? Am I missing something? Okay, let's go back to this front side. This is a 5 mana commander. Yep, it's just 5 mana. You play your commander. It's already got a really nice upside of Ward 2. It's already got a really nice upside of whenever you cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater, you draw a card. You can transform it for only 4 mana. The only stipulation being that you activate it as a sorcery, who cares? And you have to have 7 or more cards in hand, which is not hard to do. In fact, if I was playing this deck, I would just ensure I have 7 cards in my hand all the time. As soon as I play my commander, make sure I have, 6 cards in hand will do. On your next turn, you draw your card for turn, and then you have 7, you activate your commander. It's very easy to transform this. When you flip it over, you're immediately going to draw at the very minimum 7 cards. And you have no maximum hand size. You don't have to worry about discarding the hand size. Your commander is now an enchantment, which is honestly, this is actually way harder to remove than is a creature. You're actually making it harder to remove by flipping it over. So that's an added benefit. Am I missing something here? 4 mana, draw 7 cards is absurd. That on its own is absurd. You have no maximum hand size. You don't have to worry about discarding the hand size, although you would already put Reliquary Tower and Thought Vessel in this deck anyway. Chapter 2, and again, let's keep in mind, you can proliferate here as well. These are counters you're putting on this. Lots of proliferate effects in blue. So you can flip this guy over, get the card draw, and then immediately proliferate, bounce everyone else's creatures. That seems amazing. And then I can proliferate again, and I cast any number of spells from your hand without paying their mana costs. And then on top of that, it doesn't just get sacrificed like a normal saga would and go to your graveyard, so then you have to return to your command zone and sort of, that bit of drawback there. No, you're going to exile it and then return it to the battlefield on the front side again so you can repeat the process. Is this absurdly busted, or is it just me? Right? Again, even without the proliferate, I flip this over. I have a mitt full of cards. I'm in mono blue. I can have a ton of counter spells in my deck to protect. I know people say, oh, you just remove it. Everyone's going to have to start playing Croson Grip again, I guess, because you're going to need that to get this off the battlefield. But even then, they can immediately just proliferate and get those other 2 chapters right away. That's very easy to do. You may cast any number of spells, so your commander becomes an omniscience for a turn. Holy man. When I saw the front side, and I was like, okay, I didn't even look at the back side before I did this video, and I was like, oh, that seems pretty good. I mean, the Praetors are usually good. This is absurd, isn't it? Is this not absurdly busted? Maybe this makes the other Jin Cataxius look, they pale in comparison, I think. I mean, your commander even has ward 2. It's going to be very easy to protect your commander because you're in mono blue. Man, this could very easily be a Seed Age commander, I think. Is it too good? Looking at it now, I'm like, what the heck were they thinking with this? This seems absurd, but maybe I'm missing something. I don't know. You guys let me know. That's it for this video. Holy cow. How many people are talking about that commander already? I don't know. There's a lot of interesting commanders here. That Jin Cataxius, wow, that's a bit of a shocker. I'm actually still kind of stunned by it. You guys let me know in the comments below what you think of that guy. It seems absurdly busted unless I'm missing something. Maybe I am. Let me know if I am. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.